What's up guys, Mike Tierney here with Princess Auto. Welcome to Tech Tips with Mike T. We're talking about safety and maintenance on chainsaws. So we're at the point now where you've used your chainsaw for a while, you bought one. Now what are some of the accessories, what are some of the safety kind of things that we're going to go through? First things first is safety. When we're using an extremely sharp chain that's going around in a circle, we want to make sure that we protect ourselves from the actual chain, but also what we're going to be doing with it. So wood chips, lumber, whatever that might be in your case. So first we're going to talk a little bit about hearing protection and helmet protection, face protection. So there are kits available that you can purchase. You can get them individual or you can get them as a kit. They come with a screen face shield, a hard hat, and the earmuffs. We want to make sure that our hearing's protected, our face from any chipping, anything like that, and then from anything that, dead wood that's actually when you're cutting could come down. It might snap off before the rest of the tree comes down. So we want to make sure that we protect our heads from any damage. So a nice kit like this can come in a bundle. They're not expensive, and they're a really good kit to have when you're chainsawing. Gloves. So lots of variations of gloves out there. High-vis gloves are great. So if you take your gloves off for a break, you put them down, you can't find them, the high-vis will help with that. Some of them will have a shine to them, a glow. So if you're working in a lower light and you're using lights and that, they're high-vis. So a nice work glove, leather palm. Nylon's not the best. That can kind of burn if you're dragging your hand on a piece of wood. And something that's a little bit heat protection because it does warm up around the hands when you are working your chainsaw. So something that's a nice form-fitting glove, nothing that's too long. Make sure that there's no ends sticking out of the glove. So a good pair like this would be really handy, and the dexterity. If you're wearing too thick of a glove, you have no dexterity and your hands start to ache quick. So gloves are a great option. Also, there's chaps. So we have chaps that protect our thighs and our bottom half. Again, branches that are sticking out, we're not paying attention, kick back, any of that kind of activity could cause our bottom parts, our legs to get cut, impale, all that nasty stuff. So we've got chaps that are sized. They're basically tied out around the leg and around the belt. And this is a great product to keep your lower part of your body from coming into contact with possible injuries. Safety glasses, if you're not using a helmet or the kit, safety glasses are important. It's better to have a full face shield, but in any case, sunglasses aren't just going to do it. You can get tinted safety glasses if you prefer, if you're working in the sun up on a tree, but definitely you want to make sure that at minimum your eyes are protected and that you've got hearing protection, whether they're earplugs or the muffs are a lot easier. On the kit, you can just fold them away. So always be safe when you're cutting. Be aware what's around you. Make sure that there's no power lines if you're working around a house or in the neighborhood. You got to really be careful. What most people go and attempt to do is cut a limb, and they really have no idea how much that actually weighs. So it might only look that it's a couple of inches in diameter, and when you're looking at it from the ground and you're looking up, that limb may not look as big as it actually is. So be very careful when you're estimating where you're going to cut, how you're going to cut. Try to limb back in sections. The weights start to get a springing action, so a tree can react very differently if there's a lean to it. There's all kinds of information. You have to be careful with codes, so not everybody can just go out and cut a tree down. You may have to go and get permits to do that. Specific trees at specific times of the years. you can't cut because of disease and just moving that stuff. So always double check with your local city, town, wherever it is you're from before you start cutting trees. Limbing a little bit is fine, pruning, that's fine, but if you're cutting a tree down, be very aware that these things, they react very differently in all different cases, and if you don't have the safety protection to prevent that from landing on someone's house, garage, forbid anybody themselves, come-alongs and all of those things are required. You must have that ability to check with your local codes first. So always check with that, or hire someone that's bonded and certified to do that if you're not sure. Now, when it comes to some maintenance on the chainsaw, we've got a ton of different products, but they are all fairly similar. They'll look similar. So we're going to start with maintaining the bar. So I'm just going to pick up the chainsaw here, and we have our bar. Now the bar will have channels. So this kit here has a chain and a bar kit, and the chain rotates around in the channel, the bar channel. And that over time, as we cut, we basically will have debris building up inside there. The oil will stick to some of the sawdust, and the chain may start to want to not seat itself properly as you put tension or loosen off the chain. So it's a good idea every now and again, depending on how much you're cutting, is basically clean that off. Take your chain off, run a screwdriver or a pick inside, basically some air, blow some air, get rid of any of the debris that might be in this bar groove here. So that will help prevent your chain from skipping because of debris. You also have a little port on the ends of your bar. We suggest that you get an oiler. So basically it's a grease gun for chainsaws, and it's usually pre-filled, and it has a little nub on the end with a spring and a ball. Basically when you push that on, it shoots a little bit of grease inside, and it helps grease the bar. So it actually needs a little bit more maintenance than just wiping it down and cleaning it. So there is some grease points on your bar that you should be filling. And in this case, that grease point is right here. And they're on both sides. So depending on the length of your bar, depending on your model of your bar, basically find those grease points, because there's a rotating wheel or a sprocket inside that will need lubrication over time. So keep that in mind. They're really inexpensive. They come as a kit. You don't have to refill them. Basically, it takes a long time to go through this. This should last a long time. Basically, you're just going to do that every now and again just to keep things in lubed up. When it comes to adjustments, most chainsaws will have, in the kit, when you buy them new, they will have a tool. Basically, it's a wrench for spark plug, and it's also a wrench for your adjustments. It has a screwdriver so that you can adjust the tension. So some people call them a stench tool. Basically, it's a glorified screwdriver with a couple of sockets on the end. These tend to get lost. You're out in the field. Some chainsaws have a little sleeve that these will mount on, but quite often you just got them in your chainsaw case. And this is an important tool. You cannot not have this. Always have at least one, if not two or three around, because if you lose this, then your day of chainsaw kind of gets cut short, because as you are cutting and you're stretching your chain, warming it up, you will need to adjust it. So there's tension on the chain, and you got to make sure that tension stays. You don't want a sloppy chain, because it will skip the clutch. It'll come out of the groove, and you're going to damage the chain, but also your clutching mechanism. So it's important that we keep our chains in good shape, and by adjusting the tensioner. On this case, the tensioner is just this little dark nut here, and it has a little indicator that says, okay, for tightening or for loosening, turn it, and it doesn't take much to turn. You've also got your case cover, your clutch case cover, and it also has the two bolts here. And the bolts come through the chassis of the chainsaw, and that's what's actually going to sit. If we show this as an example, because this part's already in, the two bolts are sitting in this channel here. And that is your alignment. So we can move that, once they've loosened off, we can move that bar back and forth, and it'll actually move up and down. So getting that taut is important, because then you can fine tune your chain according to the, and once you tighten them down, then you lock that in place. So there's a little pin there that little screw will move and tighten your chain. So it's important to kind of work with that, get used to doing that, because over time, a few cuts, you will start to see your chain loosen off. A little tip would be, when you change out if you've gone and sharpened your chain and it's not on the bar, or you're just doing some maintenance and whatever it is, for whatever reason you had to take off that bar and chain, when you go to reinstall it, push up on the bar and then tighten your chain up. Because what happens is, if your bar sags down and you tighten it, as you start to work the chainsaw, so if we were to go and cut, the tension pushing down is going to actually move that bar. No matter how tight you tighten these, that bar is going to want to lift up. So now you've lost some of the tension in your chain. So you might as well just hold the bar up, then tighten that down, and then kind of adjust your chain tension that way. That way you're already in the up position. It's not typically going to want to wiggle on you. That would change if you are cutting from the back side, but for all intents and purposes, you're mostly going to be cutting downwards. Just lift the bar up. A little quick tip, it aids in keeping your chain tight. Now, as we use that chain, depending on what we're cutting, so good standing wood that's hasn't been damaged by fire, hasn't been damaged by windstorms. If it's standing, typically you can cut a lot of wood with your chain without having to sharpen it. But if you're cutting deadfall or something that would be, say you're trimming, you've had a flood and the logs have come up and you're trying to clear that debris. Quite often that's full of sand and dirt. That's a huge enemy when it comes to chains. That dulls chains very quickly. So you may have to more frequently sharpen your chain. So try not to dig your chain as you're cutting and slip through the log if it's directly on the ground. That timber jack from a previous video, that helps jack that log up or lay a log underneath. Don't cut a log directly on the ground and go straight into the ground. The more you dig that end into the dirt, you're going to have some issues, and you're going to have to clean it, flush it, and then resharpen it quite a bit more often. So try not to cut down into the dirt. Now, when it comes to sharpening, there's lots of options. There's manual ways. There's saw ways. So we'll just kind of point out a few. The key thing is the angle, the pitch, and the size of the files. So each chain has a number. There's usually a number stamped on the chain, and Oregon does a really good job. If you're not sure, they have really good reference charts online. You can just look up Oregon chain, and they've got a ton of different reference charts for other types of manufacturers that would be, if you're going to go to an Oregon chain, a compatible chain. So you're looking for chain diameter, the tooth count, and also the pitch that they're at. So they are different for different applications. So not every chain is the same. So you want to make sure that you get the chain that's going to actually fit your bar. And usually, if your bar is fairly new and you haven't really rubbed the information off the bar, if we look closely, Down here, we have a model number. So in this case, this one's a 78, DL, and then 0.325. So we're looking for either a chain replacement that's going to fit a 0.325, and then pitch counts, but that's the size you're looking for. Otherwise, if you get the wrong size chain, it's not going to fit in that bar. So you want to make sure you do some matching. There is, many models of them. So you do want to kind of make sure. There are some that are more aggressive. So for the person that's just doing it, the hobbyist that's just, I just want to cut a few logs, just do a little bit of maintenance. Aggressive chain can be dangerous. The kickback on them, you got to be careful. Whereas if you're an arborist or someone that does a logger, those kinds of guys, they want to cut through as quickly as possible and safely, but they're using more aggressive type chains. So when it comes to sharpening them, there's lots of options. You've got a manual file style. So you usually they come in kits of 2, and you're going to kind of run through every other chain, filing at the right angle. Now, as you get good and take some time, you'll probably go through a few chains and be frustrated if you're just doing it by hand this way, because you do have to get the right angle and the right swipe, the same amount of swipes every time. Otherwise, you'll start to you may have looks like a sharp chain, but it's actually not, because the pitches aren't cutting right. So the old school is basically just the straight file. And they come in different sizes. In this case, this one's a 5/32. You get different sizes for your different size chains. More frequently on the market now, there's files that come out with guides. Now this is a flat file, and it also has a guide. And what this does is, as you sharpen your chain and as your chain wears, there's guards behind each link. And those guards will start to become higher than your actual cutting point on your chain. And you need to not only file your chain cutting tooth, but you also have to maintain the guard. So this flat bar here is a guide that you put over top of your chain, your guard, and then that gives you the gauge height that in relation to your cutting tooth. So you can just quickly do a couple of files. Always do the same amount of swipes on every link. Don't just do 5 here and 2 here. That way you stay consistent around your entire chain. And quite a few of them have instructions on how to do that. There's lots of YouTube information on how to do that. And it may take a little bit of practice, but over a few different chains, you'll get the hang of it. We also have guides for the actual cutting tooth. So it has a depth and also a pitch. So there's markings on your guide in relation to the markings that are on your teeth. You'll actually see a little line, and that's the angle that you want to maintain your sharpener. So this just takes practice. This is kind of typically an infield or in your shed. You can do this just to tune up your chain. And again, they come in different diameters. Again, this one's a 5/32, and this one's a 7/32. So they come in a variety of different packages and sizes. There's different ways to sharpen them. So you can do on-bar sharpening. So that's typically what you can do with what we've just talked about. You can take the chain off the bar and actually sharpen it through jigs. So there are different applications where you can take the chain off, clamping, and then they have jigs that will manually sharpen. So we've got a couple of here. You also have one that's a stump sharpener. So when you're in field, if you're finding that I need to do a little bit of sharpening action, This part here has two little prongs that you smack down into a stump or a log, and then it has a clamping mechanism that you can keep your saw from, you know, moving back and forth. It'll just lock that saw in place like a vise, but it's a stump vise, and it won't wiggle on you when you're actually manually sharpening your chain. So inexpensive tool, probably you know, in most people that go and do you know, cutting in the bush, and you're a little ways away from your truck or whatever, and this is a great little tool to have in your case for just keeping your saw from maneuvering as you're trying to sharpen that chain. Now, we do have another option when it comes to sharpening. So there's the electric side. So you've got a electric motor. You can mount this to a bench top or to a wall. And this is typically done, you know, if you've got a lot of chains to do or you do a lot of cutting, and you take your chain off the saw, and it has a clamp inside here. And this little lever prevents the chain from advancing. You pull it through, it locks in, and it won't back. There's different settings that you can have, different pitches on the angle of cut. Basically, it's like a little grinder, and you just tap it once. You don't want to hold it there, because what you don't want to do is superheat the chain. So if you superheat the chain, you start to take the tempering out of it, and the chain becomes near impossible to hold an edge. So it's just a touch, 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 move along, touch, touch, touch. Do that the same for every link. So always the same amount of grinding or sharpening on every link. That way your chain stays the same all the way around. So lots of different options. You can get smaller versions. You can get a handheld version with a little grinding stone, kind of like a mini grinder with little mini stones. But there's all kinds of options when it comes to sharpening. When it comes to the actual side of logging and cutting, when you fell a tree, safety is important, obviously. We have wedges that we sell. They come in different sizes. Some can be made of basically a composite material. Some are metal. They have different pitches on them. And wedges aid to help either guide a tree to the direction that you're going to want to fell it, or it stops the tree from squatting on your bar. So if you're cutting, that tree can pinch if it starts to squat, and now your bar's stuck in there. By adding a wedge on the sides, a couple of wedges around it, it helps keep that tree from squatting on your bar and jamming up your chain. Otherwise, you'll be stuck, and then you got to bring out the axe to kind of get that thing, moving again. So wedges, a great option. Every, logger should have a bunch of these in different forms, different sizes when it comes to, handling trees. Good bar oil, you can get it in, 1 liter jugs, 4 liter jugs, depending on, how much you're doing and, the quantities you want to buy. This is the bar oil. This is not the 2-stroke oil. So this is the oil that lubricates your bar and chain. Comes in some different colors. I've seen it in red, and now it's more in a kind of a honey color. It is fairly sticky, so it does attract dirt. It does attract the wood chips and the sawdust. So that's why we want to make sure that we clean our saw, especially as it gets in and around the clutch. But you should always maintain your oil fill. Make sure that you never run out of oil. Otherwise, you're going to start to damage your saw. When it comes to some of the maintenance side, you may use your saw all year long. That is quite possible. Maybe you only use it for parts of the season. With the fuels these days, they're not the best grades out there, even though there are high grades and low grades. The fuel additives that they're putting in, there's a lot of water in the gas, and that's not good for chainsaws, especially on a two-stroke. So there's products out there to help prevent fuel from going bad. You can put fuel stabilizers in if you're storing your saw, or you can empty out whatever it is that you want to do in that maintenance side. But a product that works really well is sea foam. Sea foam is this particular type of sea foam is a fuel treatment. It's good for auto, marine. It's good for diesel. It's good for two-stroke, four-stroke. You name it. It can even go into hydraulics. So it's an additive that helps prevent water and separates. It also de-ices. It lubricates your oil, your fuel system. So it's basically all-in-one in one can. I use this on all of my small engines in my vehicles, and I add this into the jerry can that I use to fill. It's not recommended that you pour it directly into the equipment that you're actually, the small. Like in this case, we wouldn't pour this directly into the fuel tank. But you usually use a jerry can to fill up. Definitely a little bit. Couple of capfuls is all you need on a saw this size, and that will help prevent future problems with fuel. It's a really good product. It's relatively inexpensive. You can get a good amount of use out of a bottle, and this will help prevent most fuel issues, especially if you don't use it for a while. It's basically a fuel stabilizer. And this is a great product as if you're looking for a gift, if your husband's looking or wife is into these applications, and you're looking for something that they've already got it all. Sea foam or fuel additives are a great option to get when it comes to any kind of work equipment or any kind of equipment that uses an engine of any sort. Great option to have. Well, that's it for Tech Tips with Mike T. We'll see you next time.